Executive session. It is now 7:09. Okay, item number 4 on the special meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you, council. If you'll give me a moment here before we start into the regular council meeting. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. Here we are at the regular city council meeting that was supposed to start at 6:30. Special meeting ran over a few minutes, so we are now starting at 7:10. Calling the regular city council meeting to order. September 13th, 2016 at 7:10, and determine whether a quorum is present. A quorum is present. Councilman Daggett couldn't be here this evening due to a family matter. We'll keep him in our prayers and thoughts. With that said, the invocation, I think we'll be passing that up, but we will ask Miss Bonnie Hopke to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bonnie. Okay. The next item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. And we will extend a little latitude since we have one person that signed up. So with that said, Doug? You sure are. No doubt about that. Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak under citizens to be heard? I guess not. So we're going to move forward from there. The next item is the consent agenda, item 3, which is consider approval of the July 12th, 2016 special council meeting and regular council meeting minutes. Consider the approval of item B, the July 21st, 2016 special city council meeting and budget workshop 1 meeting minutes. And C, consider the approval of July 26th, 2016 budget workshop 2 meeting minutes. Is there anyone on council who would like to pull any of these consent agenda items? Mr. Gregory?
Yes, 2 minor corrections.
Yes, sir.
Under the regular city council meeting of July 12th, under item 7, announcements of the city, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down. He got his PhD from Johns Hopkins, Johns, not Hopkins. He got it at Johns Hopkins. And further on down, I was looking for a Julia Child, Juliachild, and that's it.
All right. Can we enter those into the minutes? Mike, do we need to do that as an attachment or as an agenda, or just run it into the agenda minutes? Thank you. Council, you're voting on the amendments with Mr. Gregory's corrections. So with that said, do I have a motion for the complete consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Any second? Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you so much, council. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is item 4. This is under the regular agenda. Consider and act upon instructing the city manager and the city attorney to prepare an ordinance adopting the provisions in the Texas Constitution and the Texas Tax Code that would cap the amount of taxes imposed by the city on residential homestead of a person who is disabled or at least 65 years of age. This item that before council, we asked for a motion and a second, and then let's go into discussion, and we'll have explanations after that. Do I have a motion to move it forward?
I so move the motion.
Do we have a second to move it forward? We will read the item again, the regular agenda item. Consider and act upon instructing the city manager and city attorney to approve an ordinance adopting the provisions in the Texas Constitution and the Texas Tax Code that would cap the amount of taxes imposed by the city on the residential homestead of a person who is disabled or is at least 65 years of age. Mr. Gregory, does your motion stand, Mr. Gregory?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for a second from council to go into discussion.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. On the explanation of this item, Douglas, would you please expound?
One of the advantages a lot of our sister cities have is that they give citizens 65 years and older a cap on their housing tax rate. We have never had it here in Castle Hills, and I think if we do, it would help improve home valuations. It would be a benefit to the seniors who own their house, and it would reduce another thing that we are competing with our sister cities with. It's something more that we can offer. It does one other thing. It forces fiscal responsibility upon the council. It shows that it's just not an unlimited source of income we can get from everybody by the property tax code rate. And it's that added discipline that is needed for this city. It's used for a lot of other cities and has been very successful.
Thank you, Douglas. Mr. Paul, did you have any comments or questions regarding the item on the table, please?
In case it doesn't show, I can speak to this item very well. I live in a middle price house. It's not that expensive, it's not cheap. And the amount of money that I would save if this were pushed through, because our homes are already pretty much at the top of the assessed values for the particular area. We're talking about the Castle Hills tax, not the whole tax, not the whole tax bill. So the amount of money we pay is, in the percentage, is not that great of it. I'm against this because, unlike other cities, I'm guessing, we still are fighting for funds, looking for funds for our continued infrastructure and things that we need. And that's where hopefully any funds that we find, any funds that aren't used, will go, but will be used for. That's the intention, as my understanding of this council since I've been on it. So I would like to keep the money, but I'm one vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Squire, do you have any comments or questions regarding the item on the table, please?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet.
A couple of the items, and number one, I think it's a great idea, first of all, and I'd love to be able, I'd love to be able to move forward to something like this, except and I'm not as qualified for sure as Mr. Paul is, and I guess I'm glad about that right now. one thing I don't know if he's qualified for, but no, I think he raises some very good points. And I think we, over the years, we let this city, as residents, we let this city get into the situation it's in today. And right now we fell into it, now we're trying to claw our way back out of it. And we need to continue that process, and we're fighting for every dollar to put into the infrastructure and into the administration, the admin of the city also. And so I'd love to see this move forward, but when we have successfully tackled these problems. Now, that's based on not having the ability to get this research done. And what I don't know is what would be the cost to the city. Does Mr. Gregory, do you know what the cost is, the amount of revenue lost for the city? Or Mr. Shands, do you have that information?
No, council member, we do not. That's, if you direct us to look that up, that's one of the things we would want to do, is see what the fiscal impact would be
Okay.
on the city. But we would have
So-
to go to the appraisal district, find out how many people we have who fit in this category, what their taxes are, and then try to do the calculations from there.
Okay, and before we do anything, I think we should at least have that information. Mr. Gregory brought up some very good points. He thinks it definitely adds fiscal responsibility. Well, when you take away your future money, of course, you have to be more careful. I mean, you have to continue to be more careful. I don't think that's been an issue, but you have to look at where you're going to cut. And you're going to cut somewhere, obviously, down the road to help accomplish this. The other item is, I think our property values have gone up and continue to go up, and I don't see, and if there's a way to find out, to correlate, what impact on property values or favorable impact on property values that this would have, I think that's something that we should be able to look at and see really what the impact is, favorable or non-favorable, or if there's no impact whatsoever either way. I think that's something that should be investigated on something like this. Again, I think it's an important thing we look at, but at this point in time, I'm not ready to move forward on something like this until we have the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Mr. Trevino, did you have any questions or comments for the item on the table, please?
Yes, sir. In anticipation for this agenda item, I asked the city secretary to pull up the Bear County information relating to how many property owners we have in Castle Hills and how many are filing existing for the over 65 exemption. As of right now, there are there's 2,185 properties in Castle Hills. Of those, 1,088 of them are utilizing the homestead exemption, and there's 557 of them that are utilizing the over 65, and there's various that are using the disability exemption as well. While I think it sounds great to be able to offer our residents that are either over 65 or disabled a discount, I am afraid that with the amount of capital improvements that we all need, that would further hinder us from completing those projects. While it's basically that we don't have enough money as it is, and we're talking about cutting back from it more. And that's not to say that we become a retirement community and that becomes a greater portion of the people that live in Castle Hills. In my opinion, I wasn't here, but I can only assume that we are where we are in relation to our drainage issues because we made decisions at the time that sounded like a good idea instead of doing what needed to be done at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Trevino. Okay, we have a motion made by
May I
Council.
say something else?
Of course.
Remember, this is only approval to consider and instruct the city manager and city attorney to prepare an ordinance and to gather information. And I would think this is what should be done, and then we can vote on this when we have the complete information.
Mr. Paul?
Well, if we already have the information and the knowledge on how we want to vote on it now, why waste the city attorney and the city manager's time? The other thing is that again, the amount of money that I would save would be minimum, but when you figure the 500 and some odd people and multiply it, obviously, the greater whole would be better for the city. And we have been keeping our tax rate, overall tax rate, consistent over the last 3 or 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Squire, did you have anything to add to that, or we want to move down the line? Thank you. Mr. Trevino, did you want to add to that comment?
I just want to add that, generally speaking, it's my understanding that the property values in San Antonio are in a bit of a correction, because we were fortunate enough to have relatively low property values, as a result, low property taxes.
Thank you. Before we call for the vote, Mr. Brennan, may I ask council to table this item until we have more information, or should we go ahead and go forward because we have a motion and a second?
A motion to table would supersede the motion and second if you want to ask for a motion to table.
Okay. Sure.
As Mr. Gregory pointed out, is there, if we don't vote to move this along, I mean, is there any reason you couldn't find this information out anyways and bring forward once all this information is gathered?
Sure.
Because typically that's what happens. You get the information, you bring it forward, and then we vote on it versus us instructing you to get the information as a council. It just seems kind of backwards, in my opinion.
Well, I think this was on to see if there was a desire on the part of the council to move forward with this, because it is a big step. Once you enact it, it has a big
Absolutely.
impact on your budget.
Okay.
I think now that it's been explained, I think that, there is a sort of a quandary here about the proper information that was needed by council to make a decision like this, especially if we're dealing with the fiscal health of our city. Of course, we do have a motion and we do have a second on the table. So we could take a vote as it stands, but I would encourage council to maybe table this until next time when we have some true figures to know exactly how much this impacts, which is, I think, what Mr. Gregory thought in the beginning when he made the motion to move forward. Am I putting words in your mouth, Mr. Gregory?
If I agree with him. Yes, I will move to table this motion until a date certain of next October, where Mr. Shands and Mr. Brennan will report to council relevant information concerning this proposal.
Okay, is that an amendment to the motion, or is that a full-blown change of the motion?
It's a tabling motion.
That's a tabling motion. Okay, we have a tabling motion on the floor. Mr. Gregory has asked for this motion to move forward. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and we have a second. Thank you. Okay, with that said, we are going to call first for the table. So with that said, all in favor of tabling this until we have the correct information to move back by Mr. Shands, please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, so we've got three. Mr. Paul, I'm assuming that you wanted to vote nay on this particular item? Never mind. So, right, okay, got it. So it passed 3. It is a majority of council, so the item passes to table until the next city council meeting. Okay, here we go. The next item is item 5. It is consider a resolution R2015-09-13, a resolution requiring notification that all open meetings of the City of Castle Hills are subject to being recorded. There were two people that actually are going to speak on this. Douglas, did you want to speak first?
It's a very simple motion. I think some people were surprised to find out. Everybody knows the city council meetings are recorded, but I think some people may have an expectation of privacy in other meetings. This simply just makes it clear that all open meetings in the city of Castle Hills are going to be subject to recording, and it's just a simple announcement at the meetings for people to be aware.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Let's get a motion and a second on the table. and then we'll move forward with discussion. Mr. Shands, did you want to mention anything on this before we move forward?
No, I think you all have covered it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shands. Okay, with that said, do I have a motion to move item 5 on the agenda forward?
I so move the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second for discussion. Okay, we have a second from Mr. Squire for discussion. We'll start again on the end of the table. Mr. Gregory, did you want to move forward or talk about anything that you had other than what you've said?
I'm finished with what I've said.
Thank you. Mr. Paul, did you have any questions or comments about the item on the table?
I believe the definition of open meeting would basically say that it's open meetings and you can record it, do whatever you want. To me, that would be, it's just an additional ordinance, an additional regulation, an additional whatever, just to pass this, and I think it's superfluous.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Squire, did you have any discussion or questions regarding the item on the table, please?
Yeah, I do, thank you. It says, does the government code require you to read aloud at the beginning of each meeting that the open meeting is subject to being recorded? So if somebody here came up with that?
Yes.
Okay. The government code requires, I guess, what? A, B, C, A, B, 1, 2, and C, correct? And that's where it stops. Okay. What is the definition of an open meeting?
A quorum of members present.
And that meeting is normally posted, correct?
Yes.
And if you're in an open meeting, is there any reason you would think it's not being recorded?
I guess you would have to ask the person who didn't know it was being recorded. No, I think that there is an expectation, generally speaking, that it is because you take minutes, but I think it's also in some of our meetings, they would probably not necessarily expect that every single person who spoke would be recorded, but certainly that the recording, if it picked it up over there, for example, where Ms. Bunton is, she would be recording it, and if you spoke loud enough in here, you would have a reasonable expectation that she could hear you. But if you just said something from the audience, you might not. I mean, it would be recorded completely at this point. And it's not just to let you know that we're doing it, it's to let you know that anybody can do it. Any member of audience can record the meeting. They can set up a camera in the back and record the meeting.
And they could do that today without this, correct?
They can do it right now.
Right now. So it doesn't impact that whatsoever.
This ordinance does nothing except say what the law allows and add the part that says, in case someone didn't come in with an agenda or you didn't know it for some reason, it's announced before each meeting that it's subject to being recorded, whatever you say.
If this resolution does not move forward, does that take away any rights?
No.
Of anybody? If it moves forward, does it take away any rights?
No.
If it moves forward and somebody forgets to say that this meeting is subject to be recorded, what impact is there?
I'll yield to Mr. Brennan.
I guess the presiding officer that failed to read or make the statement that the meeting could be recorded violated this resolution. I don't know what else would happen to him. It's not a criminal offense.
Okay. Mr. Brennan, in your estimation or in your opinion, is there any value in passing this ordinance? Does it provide anything for the city above what we already have? Because we fall under this anyways, correct?
We fall under all meetings where there's a quorum present fall under the Open Meetings Act and are subject to being recorded, videoed, whatever. And this ordinance doesn't really add anything other than a personal warning from the presiding officer that I guess that you better watch out because you might get recorded here.
Okay. All right. So I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Mr. Trevino, did you have any questions or comments regarding the item on the table, please?
After hearing that, I would feel it's in our best favor to not have the presiding officer say that every time if it's already understood that that's implied.
I'm going to throw in something here. Douglas, do you have something else to say?
Yes, I do know that I find this very interesting. When we call our credit card companies, we're told this meeting, this conversation is going to be recorded for future blah, 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 which translates, we're covering our assets in case we say something we shouldn't want to say, and you don't want to say something. Credit card companies have it done. A lot of people in this city don't realize that when you call the city manager, when you call dispatch, they may realize dispatch, but conversational calls that are made to the city manager are recorded. I didn't know that, but they are. And I assume now that all conversations made to the fire chief, sanitation department, everybody else is recorded. The idea that this has to bring a benefit it's simple. And I can't see why anybody would oppose this. It is letting people know that what you say is being recorded. It, or might be recorded, or might not be recorded. But it's simply put out there for everybody who doesn't deal with government all the time, and that just be aware of what you're saying, and that's it. It's very simple, very innocuous, and for the life of me, I don't see why what anybody's afraid of by having this.
Frank?
Not afraid of anything. It just puts it on top of what we already have. Why double up? You just heard our city attorney explain it, and it just seems that we're wasting time on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Mr. Trevino, you had a question or comment, please?
I would say it's very simple that we could just, there's a sign outside the door. That way, it's not something the mayor has to repeat every possible time and leave the possibility of him not saying it and using that as an excuse.
Mr. Brennan, excuse me. Mr. Brennan, does the city have a responsibility to report a meeting that has been recorded? Does it have a responsibility, like the credit card companies, to report to people, we've recorded this meeting, it's there if you want to hear about it?
I don't know of any responsibility
Thank
to
you.
do that.
Mr. Brennan, I have a quick question. Now I'm confused. Isn't there a state law on the books that says that any conversation of any sort on the telephone, behind the glass door, hidden in the restroom, whatever, can be recorded, providing that one person knows that that item is being recorded?
As far as I know, that's a correct statement of the law.
Okay. I was just curious. Being 62 years old, I wasn't sure whether I heard correctly.
Mr. Mayor, may I
Yes,
comment?
of course.
You know, again, I
John.
see this as more bureaucracy, and I'm not in favor of more bureaucracy. But to Mr. Gregory's point is that items he brought up are really outside of open meetings. And, you know, I think everybody should understand that anything you say pretty much can be recorded. And if we don't got that tonight, then we're not listening. But that's all. Thank you.
I think by just this meeting tonight, we've made it pretty clear where we stand. Okay, with that said, we have a motion and we have a second on the table, and this will be, consider a resolution requiring notification that all open meetings of the city of Castle Hills are subject to being recorded. This is a yes or no vote. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, council. It loses 3-1. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is consider an ordinance 2016-0913, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 461 and adopting in its place new mandatory retirement age for certain members of the fire and police department. Mr. Brennan, would you please explain this one?
Mayor and council, this is the response to your request about a month ago, whenever you said that we needed to go ahead and replace the ability to provide hazardous materials cleanup and such things in the event of accidents for the, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. How about I go back to this one?
Sure.
Sorry. I was already talking about
granted,
the
Mr. Shands,
fire.
thank you.
I'm sorry, this is the one that Mr. Brennan will brief you on that puts us in compliance with federal law.
Yeah. Apparently, there was an ordinance adopted, number 461, a number of years ago, that mandated a retirement age of 65 for members of the fire department and police department. And after reviewing that with our attorney, employment law attorney that specializes in this work, we pretty much determined that that was an invalid ordinance and needed to be replaced with a more current ordinance. So this ordinance repeals the ordinance 461 that was adopted back in 1984 and replaces it with a new ordinance that now establishes a new mandatory retirement of age of 66 for personnel in the police and the fire departments that are actively engaged in police and fire department activities. It does not apply to civilian employees in those departments or other exempt employees in those departments. And we recommend that this is a good replacement for the prior ordinance. Full Social Security benefits now kick in at age 66, and that's how we pretty much adopted this 66 age recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Okay, let's get a motion on the table.
So move.
Second? Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Let's start with Mr. Trevino. Have any comments or questions?
I'm all for it.
Mr. Squire?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So again, if this is something that we don't move forward, then we're violating state ordinance, is that correct?
No, federal law.
Federal law?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I need to know, thanks.
Mr. Paul, would you like to comment, sir?
No, it's just that those are the magic words. Thank you.
How does this affect somebody who is planning to retire this year at 65, put in his notice, and now he seems that, no, he didn't have to? Can he withdraw his retirement plans if the desire, since the age has changed?
Well, this ordinance goes into effect immediately, and I would assume that if he hasn't already finished the retirement process, that he could avail himself of the benefit of this ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Okay, we have a motion on the table, and we have a second. All in favor of the motion? It's unanimous. Thank you, council. Let's move on. Item number 7, consider the action regarding approval of resolution number 2016-0913A, resolution accepting the resignation of Carmen Gamez as a director of the Crime Control Prevention District. Do we have a motion for this item? Second? All in favor? Thank you, council. All right, the next one is appoint a member of the Castle Hills Crime Control and Prevention District, CCPD. Are there any nominations? Now, the way we'll do this is like we did before. We're going to start to the right. We're going to see if anyone's nominated, and if they are, then we'll take a vote at that time. That's how we've done it in the past, if I remember correctly. So,
Mayor, you're going to require a second on the nominations or just a nomination?
we've done it both ways. So let's do the, we're going to get the names first, correct? Douglas, do you have anybody you'd like to? Thank you. Mr. Paul, do you have anybody?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Michael Poole.
Michael Poole.
Mike has lived in the city, he and his wife Audrey, for 21 years. He's owns a sign company, and he's helped the city in different areas, and Mike has been willing to step forward, and I think he'd make a great addition to the crime control.
Thank you. Mr. Squire, did you have anybody to add to that list? No, I do not. Thank you. Mr. Trevino, do you have anybody?
No, sir.
Wow. Okay. With that said, it looks like the nomination pool is Mike Poole. So with that said, do I have a motion to appoint Mike Poole to the Crime Control Prevention District? You can. Second? All in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you. The next item is item 9, discuss a possible action revising the compensation schedule for municipal court officials, excuse me. Mr. Brennan, would you explain this item, please?
You know, we, at the last meeting, touched on this subject, but never finished it, and I think the understanding was that the city manager and I would come back with a recommendation on fair and reasonable compensation for the two principal officials of the court, which is the municipal court judge and the municipal prosecutor. Mike and I have met with both of those individuals, the presiding judge and the presiding prosecutor, and listened to their concerns and analyzed the time that they are spending on these court sessions and out-of-court sessions. And it's our recommendation that the judge compensation per court session be set at the $750 recommended in there, and that he also be compensated for magistrate sessions. Currently, the judge is receiving, I think, $450 or $500 per court session, but the court sessions are longer now than they've ever been because of the additional citations that are being issued under the new state law that permits a city's police department to issue citations in the area near the city, but not necessarily in the city. They're handling 2 court sessions per month on a regular basis, and then they have another court session that's a trial session for people that insist on a trial. So on an average, there's going to be 3 of these court sessions per month. The judge also attends magistrate sessions where arrests are made and a prisoner has to be brought before a magistrate immediately to either set a bond or to be committed to the jail. And these are often middle of the night or weekend appearances that the judge has to come into town or come over here to make. And this is very, very cheap compensation for the time that it takes the judge to do that. But he's willing to do it because he likes his work here at the city. We also recommended that the judges are mandated to attend continuing legal education one time per year, a seminar per year. The state pays for the seminars, but it does not pay for travel expenses and for anything for the judge while he's there. So we were recommending that, and usually these seminars are 2-day seminars, so that these would be treated as court session times or dates. And then tagging along is the prosecutor, who traditionally receives less compensation, although with the extra workload, the prosecutor has been calling in an assistant prosecutor to try to finish the court dockets within a 4 to 5 hour time frame. And the prosecutor also has to handle the appeals that go down to the county court, and those are we recommend just be paid on the regular hourly rate that it takes an attorney to do that. And the recommended compensation is way under the hourly rate of these attorneys. I think that the judge's normal hourly rate is probably $300 an hour, and I think for the prosecutor it's probably, I don't know, $200 or so. And the real net receipt on these things is, pretty slim compared to what they normally make. But I think both of them enjoy their work as a public service, but it's also fair to pay them some reasonable compensation. And that's what this is an updated recommendation. I think we've been on the present pay scale for these gentlemen for as long as I've been here. It's been the same, probably 15 or more years.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Mr. Brennan. Let's go ahead and get a motion and a second on the table, please. May I have a motion? Thank you, Frank. Motion, thank you, JR. Okay, we got a motion and a second on the table. Mr. Gregory, do you have a comment, please?
The court appeals per hour, could you review that again?
Those are county court appearances. All municipal court appeals go to the county court system. And I personally have I did this for 30 years in Alamo Heights, handled the court appeals. It's a challenge every time you go down there because the county court judges really have no particular interest in enforcing Castle Hills or any other municipal court or city rules. You have to be pushy with the judges to get heard. It usually doesn't take more than an hour or two per court session, and usually these come up once a month. So it's not a large expenditure of money, but it's critically important to have good representation down there, because if it ever becomes known that that a city is not following up on its appeals down there, the judges just throw out the cases, and it becomes a system. And I've seen this happen in the past. It becomes a system to where the lawyers just appeal the cases down to the county, knowing that they're going to get thrown out unless there's an attorney there representing the city.
Mike, who pays for your continuing education?
I do.
So you don't bill any city
No.
for your continuing education?
No.
Well, why are we doing it now? Because if you have a 3-day travel, you're looking at $2,250 plus travel expenses and a hotel room. I assume that's under travel expenses.
Yes,
Which
sir.
is probably another $300. So you're looking about a $2,700 trip for somebody to go for continuing education for 3 days.
Well, the rationale for us paying it is it's mandatory that they do it as a judge. These lawyers are having to attend continuing legal education in general for their other practice. This doesn't help them in their regular practices. So this is a different type of, it's like mandatory court training that the state puts on and mandates that they attend if they're going to serve as a municipal court judge. It's not part of their regular continuing legal education that they attend on their own dime, so to speak. I mean, you can argue that if they want to take the job, then they've got to pay for their own continuing legal. In fact, a lawyer that goes to normal continuing legal education not only pays for their time and their expenses, they pay for the course. I have to pay for the course itself. In this case, the state is paying for the course, it's putting it on. But since it's mandatory that they do it for that particular function, I feel like it's reasonable that the judge receives some compensation for the amount of time that he's taken out of his schedule to do it, to attend it.
If this is a judge of more than one city, who pays for it?
Well, I would think an honest judge, and I'm sure we have a very honest judge, would prorate that or split it up in some way to where there would be some benefit to the cities for doing, But as far as I know, our judge only is the judge here in Castle Hill, so I don't think that there would be a split up here.
Well, I know in my industry, I pay for all my continuing education. The firm doesn't pay for it at several $1,000s a year. I don't have to go anywhere because you can do it at your own computer. You don't have to travel anywhere to do it. You can Skype it. You can do all sorts of stuff. And just seems to me this is a boondoggle cost
Okay.
that can be done simply from your computer in your office.
Yeah, we could check that, because I agree with you. If the lawyer can do this continuing legal education in his office, then there's no reason we should be paying, I guess, the time and travel expenses. I think the state I mean, they put these on in the main cities, you know, where you're not going to Tahoe or someplace for one of these classes. But I think it's mandatory that they go there. If it turns out that it's not mandatory that they attend it at the site, then I would say that probably, you know, we wouldn't be paying for this.
Thank you.
Okay. Frank, did you have any comments or?
What was this before, what had we paid before this?
It's, Mike, I think the judge was getting paid $450 and the prosecutor was getting paid $350.
Well, what about the travel and the continuing
Oh, I mean, on the
education?
continuing legal education? No, previously, there was no compensation or no, the judge was having to pay it out of his pocket. That's the current status of it right now.
So you're saying that by doing the continuing education, that this does not carry over to his practice?
No, it's specific for municipal judge training. Our judge, you know, is a litigation attorney.
Right.
And I'm sure that his normal continuing legal education is in that field.
And it's just 3 days a year?
2 days a year. Oh, I see. It says typically 3 days a year. I think that's an error. I think it's, maybe there's, well, I think the intention here is just to pay for the actual continuing legal education sessions, not the travel days.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. It does say that. I think travel is recommended. The expense of gasoline to get there, or you know, I assume most of the time people are going to drive, but not being paid for the time driving the car there. Yeah, I don't think it would include food either.
Yes, sir. Mr. Squire, did you have any questions or comments for
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Brennan, again, I gotta take the concern that Mr. Gregory has brought up. Do other cities, do they pay for continuing education? You know.
You know, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I don't know. I wish I could say for sure, but I don't know enough to say. I don't know.
Well, I think, you know, I think trying to for the workload, it sounds like it has increased over the last couple of years, and I agree with the changing the values of the per court session, the magistrate, and also for the prosecutor. But I have a hard time with the continuing education, because other industries I'm familiar with, you know, they all pay for their own education, and so I just don't see that. I think potentially if a prosecutor down the road does work for 2 cities, you know, then you have potentially double dipping by mistake or not mistake, and I think that could create an issue.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point, Councilman Squires, and we weren't recommending it for the prosecutor because I don't think they have a mandatory continuing education like the judge does. But the most important parts of this are the court sessions that are delineated, and if the council is reluctant to authorize it for continuing legal education, let's drop that out of it for right now, and we can do some further study on that. I can check and see, and if there's if in some way we're mistreating our folks, then we can come back to you about that.
okay, thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Okay, so that means when we move forward with the motion, we'll have to delete that out of the.
Yes, sir. We can
Yes,
do
sir,
that.
thank you. Mr. Trevino, did you have any questions or comments, please?
Yes, sir, Mayor, thank you. Mr. Brennan, do you know what the standard is, at what point they bring in the assistant prosecutor?
We put in there as needed, and it's not automatic that there's going to be a need for an assistant prosecutor, but apparently the workload is pretty heavy, and I don't know how many people are coming in here, you know, whether it's 200 or 300 per court session, but apparently it's pretty heavy, and you have to generally handle each case individually. You know, normally the judge didn't say, who wants to plead not guilty, or, I mean, guilty, and everybody raise their hand. That doesn't happen. They come in here a lot of time with lawyers and want to discuss their case. And the prosecutor is the first person who addresses the case with the defendant. And that's when they try to determine what their plea is going to be and what the reasons are and so forth. So the prosecutors process the cases that come in and as the people arrive. And apparently there was a bottleneck that was happening at that point. Once the cases are processed by the prosecutor, then they come in, go up to the judge as a recommendation from the prosecutor, and then the judge individually, it saves it saves him a lot of time. It's my understanding there's a judgment call in there as to whether on a certain court session, they know in advance how many cases are going to be presented on any given day, and there's a judgment call as to whether there's a need for an assistant prosecutor, and there's no other way to do it other than to leave it up to the prosecutor to decide whether he needs help or not processing that particular docket that day.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there was something that we could potentially be mindful for.
Well, that's our discussion with the prosecutor, is that we don't want to pay any more than we have to pay. And we'd rather not be paying anything for the assistant prosecutor. We called out a lot of, the judge and the prosecutors both get numerous calls at their offices during the week, from other lawyers and maybe other judges and want to talk about cases. And I have learned myself personally that you can't refuse to take the calls, but it just takes a lot of time. And that's why both of them were interested in being compensated for that extra time in their office, and we just didn't feel like it was appropriate to be charging for office time. We want to just be charging for time that you're here when everybody can see you and see what you're doing,
Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Sure.
Mayor, I'd like to,
John?
sorry, Mayor, I'd like to amend this motion
Okay.
that discuss and take possible action revising the compensation schedule for municipal court officials and striking, or do you want to say striking or deleting the continuing legal education verbiage, or how do you want?
Yes, just strike that or delete that from the pay schedule.
Council, it appears that, okay, so John, what he's done is he's stricken the item that he spoke about and Mr. Brennan agreed upon. Do we have a second for the strike? Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is on the amendment only. All in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. Thank you. Now, let's go back to the original amendment, the original item, which is thank you.
Going back to court appeals per hour,
Yes, sir.
should there be a cap per day of the number of hours that can be charged? Because I, from personal experience, I know lawyers start charging the second to get in the car, all the way down to the parking lot before they even get into it. Anyway,
May I-
I'm just saying whether or not we should cap the per hour day charge that can be done in an hour.
Douglas, I don't have any principal objection to that, other than I think this problem solves itself because the county court judges don't want to spend time on municipal court cases. They're down there doing DWIs and, high level, what they consider big cases or important cases, and they relegate these appeals to a few minutes at the beginning of every court session, and that's why rarely do these transactions take more than an hour.
Thank you.
Thanks, Douglas, for that thought. I would be very careful before we start limiting that, because I think, when we get into these extended cases, I can assure you that when it's kind of like when I get home and the cat's there, you're not going to get away without feeding it. So what happens is when they're buzzing to get out the door at 5 o'clock, 5:30, and If someone comes in after that designated time, well, that's too bad. They're going to have to do it next time. So I think, as Mr. Brennan said earlier, it fixes itself. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. We've already voted on the amendment. So being on item 9, all in favor? Okay, it passed. Thank you. Item 10, consider the ordinance of 2016-0913A, an ordinance establishing a billing program for emergency and non-emergency services by the fire department. Mr. Shan?
Since I explained this earlier, I'll now turn it over to Chief Riedel.
Thank you, Mr. Shan.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. If you recall, we have in the past had a company doing the billing for recuperating costs related to chemical spills, automobile accidents, and the like, and that was a company called Revenue Rescue. I believe we started billing for that with that company in either 2008 or 2009, and enjoyed their services up until recently, where the company was overtaken by a bigger conglomerate called Intermedics, and have since decided not to continue on with the fire service billing. They only do EMS billing. So subsequently, I went out looking for a company to replace them, and have presented a proposal by a company called Fire Recovery USA. It's a nationwide company. They serve over 700 departments nationwide. In Texas, they sent me a list. It was over 90 different departments in Texas that they cover, largely volunteer, but also there are some paid departments utilizing their services, including regionally Bulverde Spring Branch, Leon Springs, San Marcos, Buda, and the like. You'll notice during budget reviews that there was a lag in that particular item for this past year. We're just trying to recoup that loss and have appropriated a sum of about $10,000 in the proposed budget for 27, utilizing the fees collected from this company.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay. We've read the item. Can I have a motion, please, and a second to get it on the table? Second. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Trevino, do you have any comments or questions for Mr. Riedel?
Not at this time, sir.
Thank you. We will make another swipe around if you want. Mr. Squire, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, a couple items, Mr. Riedel, and I know we've had some discussion about this, and in reviewing this, and I understand the current practice that we, do not, because our citizens pay into the fire department as part of our taxes.
Correct.
And that the practice is not to charge our citizens for calls unless they become excessive. And with that said, though, in reviewing this document, I see no protection like that from our citizens. I think it would allow calls to start or costs to start being charged immediately to our citizens. I understand that's not the practice. I also understand that's not the intent going forward.
Correct.
And I believe we need to move forward on this, except I want to make sure we do protect our residents in the city. And I'd like to see that language in there before this is approved.
Right. And I'd spoke with the city manager about that same thing earlier this afternoon, and I think he can clarify that for us.
Yes, excuse me, Councilman Squire. Your intent, I assume for a moment, and just clarify it for me, is that if we make a call in an accident, one of our citizens has been injured, that we do not charge them. Let me ask you a question about what if we have a resident who is DWI, hits a pole, kills 2 people, and has a hazardous mat spill. Can we go for recovery on that one? So we got to word this very carefully. Just being a resident, do you have to be a property owner? Do you have to be not the person who receives the citation? Are you saying just a blanket, we don't care anything at all, you're free?
Not saying that. And
Okay,
again,
I didn't think so, but we need to be clear.
Absolutely
So
not.
what
What you
what
understand
is
is
the
that-
intent?
Yeah, and the intent is to protect the residents that are, you know, how would you say, normal calls? Maybe there's a mutual assistance call that comes out. Obviously, if it's egregious or causes significant amount of property damage, I don't know how you determine that necessarily.
I struggled with it too. The other thing I would ask if council would consider, that since we have had this policy in effect, it seems to pass a little better muster if we say, it's almost like saying nobody gets tickets in Castle Hills if you're a resident. You know, that, I'm not saying that that's sometimes true, but I'm saying we sure don't publish that. And I would be reluctant to publish in an ordinance that this applies to everybody who's visiting our city, who's driving through it, but if you're a resident, you get a get-out-of-jail-free card. That can be a policy within the department, as it has been with judicious use forever. And if we could maybe leave that way and have reference to these tapes, if it ever gets to be an issue, there would be probably, in my mind, a much more acceptable ordinance,
Okay.
if that's okay.
And that's fine. I mean, if you have a nefarious individual or something that happens and they start going after, then that would be my concern.
Absolutely, and that would be ours also. Thank you very much.
Okay. The other item I looked at is this is an evergreen contract. I'm not a big fan of evergreen contracts, because if you miss that window and you, you know, for some reason you miss that window and you're locked and you're not happy with it, then you're locked into it for another year at this point. I understand it's a year to your contract. Now, on the flip side, as I read this too, is you can give 30 days written notice to terminate this contract too. What I want to make sure of, though, is upon reading this contract, Mr. Brennan, and that's Article 8, termination of the agreement is what I'm looking at, does the 30 days, does that supersede the evergreen portion of this contract, the automatic renewal?
Yes, sir. That is the number one provision that I look for in every contract that I review, is can we get out of it if it doesn't work? And as you can see, as you stated in 8.1, either party of this contract can terminate by giving 30 days written notice. And then the next sentence says, unless earlier terminated, which meant that you gave earlier notice. If you didn't give earlier notice, then it's effective for a period of 1 year and can automatically renew for 1 year periods thereafter. But as long as you have that 30-day cancellation provision in there, that applies at any time during the term of the contract, which is the way we want it.
Okay, thank you. That's all questions.
You bet. I mean, I'm glad you noticed that, because to me, that's the number one issue. Can you get out of it when you realize you made a mistake?
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Mr. Paul?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Basically, this is same thing as we have in place. We're just changing companies, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So our procedures, policies, what we do.
Procedures stay the same. We have the full discretion of submitting the reports,
Right.
which
They
allows.
don't do anything unless we approve it.
That's exactly right.
Right.
There are actually 2 methods of submitting reports. One is they can actually tab into our firehouse reporting system, and we can flag those reports, like for motor vehicle accidents, to be automatically submitted to their database. But we still have the authority, we still have to go in once a week or twice a week, whatever we choose, and click go ahead with this particular bill.
Right.
So, I mean, we get full discrepancy on each one of the bills that are being submitted.
Thank you. And I was going to mention one more thing, but John already talked about it. I think any contract, I don't care what it is, any contract we do, we got to make sure we're not stuck into an evergreen situation. And obviously, it's taken care of under the 30-day. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Gregory, do you have any comments, please?
Mr. Brennan is under Article 3, 3.7, is that normal? Client appoints company as client's attorney in fact.
I think it is for this type of contract. I mean, they're a billing service and a collection service, and it's my understanding that that is normal, that they are going to take whatever action that if the city authorizes them to proceed, that they're going to take whatever action they need to take or believe that they need to take, and that we authorize them to do that.
So who's liable if they take an illegal action?
Well, worst case, but over in 10.1, we also have an indemnity from them that they will indemnify us and hold us harmless from and against all claims, liabilities, and so forth, resulting from any negligent action. If the company does something that's wrong or careless or negligent, then they indemnify us against those losses.
Those hold harmless clauses are still, they're not being, I thought they were challenged a long time ago.
You're right. They've always been challenged, and they're still in there, and they're still enforceable.
Okay. I'm glad Mr. Squire looked at 8.1. I was looking at also at 8.2B. I find that sort of self-serving, that little section there, the assignment of this agreement by either party without the consent of the other party. The parties agree that neither party would be unreasonably without consent to such an assignment. That really is sort of self-serving, but I guess there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, that's probably in there, like the chief said, the first contract probably got assigned from the entity that got acquired to the new entity. And this one does give us some opportunity to object to that, to such an assignment.
In 11.3, no party may assign any of its rights or obligations hereunder without the express written consent of the other party hereto, which consent may not be unreasonably withheld. Doesn't that handcuff us?
Handcuff us? You know what it does? It gives us the 30-day opportunity to get out of the deal if we want to. I mean, that's.
Does it? Is that?
Yeah, the escape clause that we have on 30 days' notice is if we don't like an assignment that they're proposing to make, then we just say, it's over.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Okay. I think we'll wait for Mr. Paul. Wait just a moment. Jerry, when does this have anything to do with the Liability Act, where we clean up things out on the freeway and anything? Is this part of that? Well, you get in a wreck and our guys are out there and, for years, not years, but we used to collect income for cleaning up everything out there?
And this is part of that.
That's part of that?
Part of
Okay,
that, yes,
that's
sir.
all I need to know. You don't need to
Covers the
go
cost,
into-
covers those costs of us
Okay.
cleaning up the debris or any spills out there during accidents.
All right,
Next question,
of course.
Mayor. We've been without a firm like this for how long? Are we still
About 8 months.
8 months?
Yeah.
Will all of the previous responses that you've had that would involve this type of service, will you be able to submit that to them?
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask about that, but from I'd have to defer to the city attorney if that would be something. If you're to me, it would be if you're passing the ordinance now, it takes effect now. But that'd be, I would think.
This is like an insurance policy, isn't it, Mike?
The service.
I don't know if it's an insurance policy, but, I mean, I think we can certainly, I mean, they're in business to make money, and if we can refer old cases to them that they can make money off of, I'm sure they would be happy.
I would certainly,
But I
certainly will try.
I'm not sure they're obliged to accept them, but I assume they probably would.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question, so we can go back. Yes?
On the last page, 6, under late fees. Is this legal? A 10% late 10% charge of a late charge, one-time charge, and then a 1.5% charge per month, if that's what they're charging. That can work out to 22.5%.
What item was that? I'm sorry.
Under late fees, page 6. On mitigated rates based per hour, Exhibit A.
On page 6?
Yeah, the very last page of the fee schedule, I believe,
Oh, the fee schedule.
or Schedule A, I should say.
Is that legal to charge that much? I mean, I know CPS really screws people in town by charging them about 10% every time that they don't pay per month, or 120% per year on an annualized basis. But here, this is a remarkable charge to me. This is what they want to charge.
Yeah, Chief, we may need to talk to him about that, because that sounds kind of high to me, too. I mean, we expect they're going to charge lawful fees, and, you know, in Texas, there is a usury law that says you can't charge interest that's too high, and they're not saying this is interest, but any charge for the use or forbearance of money is considered interest, and a late charge is okay. 1.5% per month, probably okay, but you add them together, it may be too much.
Yeah.
That's something that we'll address before we sign a contract with them. That's a good catch.
Okay. Douglas, you done?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there anybody else before we move forward? Thank you, Chief. Okay, I believe we have a motion, right? We had a motion? Okay, and we have a second. With that said, discussion is complete. All in favor? Thank you. It is unanimous. Council, I would ask if it would be all right if we move item 12 up. We've had these poor people waiting here due to our extended executive thing in front of item number 9. This won't take very long. Seems it would be maybe 2 or 3 minutes max before we go into the re-roofing thing, which I think will take some time. Does anybody have a problem with that? John?
No, I just, also too, is I was looking at item number 13, and we're gonna move that forward too, since we have the engineer here waiting for us to, for you to go
Yeah,
ahead
it will
and
fall
share that.
into line. It'll fall in, okay. So basically, leave the roofing to last, is that what, no, wait. Yeah, the roofing to last.
Move item number 9 to be, correction, move item 11 to be after item number 13.
Okay, do y'all have any problem with that? Okay, good. All right, the next one, we're going to do item number 12. We're moving up. What that is that's a committee appointed by the mayor to start on or complete, whichever it works out, the master plan of the city. A master plan was put together years ago, and what we did was we never consummated that or did anything regarding that. So it's a good master plan, but it needs to be looked at. I think that this is probably one of the most important committees of this decade. This is going to decide the future of our city. And what I did was I asked people to bring nominees forward and on their expertise, their skills, and this is not a political committee, as you'll see once I read the names. It took basically the whole city into consideration. There's some in the lower cone, there's some in the upper cone, there's some in the estates, there's some in the north of 410. So with that said, we're going to move along, okay? So what I did was I picked, just want to make sure I get it right. I picked 8 people And the first thing you're going to say is, 8 people, well, what if you have a tie? Well, between yourselves, what you're going to do is you're going to come up with a chairman on your first meeting, and that chairman will be able to break a tie if needed. Is that legal, Mr. Brennan?
Sure. Is the chairman going to be able to vote, though? He's still going to be a voting member, right?
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Right, okay. Okay, so with that said, here we go. The first person would be Tom Reichenberger. Tom and his wife live over on Irongate, isn't it? Lockhaven, that's what I said. Lockhaven. Tom is an executive with a large paper company here in the United States. He's also probably a person who has the most solar panels of anybody in this city. I asked him the other day what his utility bill was, and he told me. I'm not going to say it. He also is a pilot of the drone that we get a lot of our pictures from on our Facebook page, which I'll follow up later on. And he's quite the pilot. So Tom, thank you very much for your stepping forward. Like I said, this is a very important committee. We have a lot of information for y'all to sift through and decide what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15, 20 years. The next one, the gentleman is Steve Ackley. Most of you know Steve. He's a professor, I believe, out of UTSA. He is been a longtime resident. And then I thought it would be a good idea to bring somebody in who could bring in a family element to our city. And several of you gave me ideas, and the one that stuck out in my mind was Amy McLendon. And Amy is there. Amy, I'm sorry, you're a lawyer, right? Yes, she is a lawyer. She and her husband live over on Villa Ann. Okay, a participant in all of our city functions. I don't think I've seen one yet where she hadn't been there with her family. National Night Out, I usually go to her first. She has great food. Thank you, Amy. The next gentleman is one that's I don't think there is anyone in town more politically tied than this person. Personal friends with the nearly Vice President of the United States that was being considered. He runs large sections out of the Port of San Antonio. He's probably the only guy I know that can walk in and put his feet on Judge Wolf's desk. His name is Juan Solis. Juan lives in the Upper Cone. He has volunteered, and he will, I think, make a great member of the committee. The next one is Don Rochelle. Don lives in one of the most controversial areas of this city. He lives right behind me. Also, he's involved with the flooding initiative that's coming across Lock Hill, Selma, West Avenue. He and his next door neighbor are leading the charge on that from the resident point of view. He is in the commercial real estate business, and he is also well connected in areas of networking. The next person is Thomas Fentress. Thomas is also in commercial real estate. He's down in the Foxhall area, which is, he lives on South Winston Lane, 2 houses down from the corner of Foxhall. He's very familiar with the comings and goings of that area down there and connected with a lot of the people down in that area. So that will be a strong representation of that area. The next person we all know and love, most of us. He is a city council member sitting up here this evening. And he is, I don't know of anybody who has probably walked every inch of drainage He's on the Drainage Committee. He served on the Advertising Billboard Committee. He has been a councilman now for how many years? 10? 15? Who's counting, right? That's Mr. Douglas Gregory. Douglas will bring not only his skills, but he'll bring his knowledge. He'll bring his leadership with the Drainage Committee. And I feel very good about the fact that he's on that. The next one is also a person who has served this community for a long time. He does happen to sit on council also. He's what I would call the turn-to guy. I mean, a lot of people listen to this individual, and he's kind of like E.F. Hutton, you know, when he speaks. You know, that's a joke. But he travels the United States as a counselor. He travels the United States as someone who is very strong in business. He is someone who will make and complete that group, and that's Mr. Frank Paul. He will also sit on that committee. So with that said, I think what we're going to do is we're going to send out a notice of the first meeting. We hadn't decided yet because we want to get some schedules together. And I suspect that those meetings will take place up here, and in your first meeting, you'll be deciding who your chairman's going to be, and we'll have some explanation of the past master plan that was brought forward. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions or any comments or whatever about the intention of this committee? It's basically going to be a committee that will turn this city upside down. And it's going to take the A&M study. It's going to take all the studies that we've had, the zoning studies, everything that we've had, and bring it together so we can move forward in the next 20 years. With that said, thank you very much, Tom, Don, Amy, for sitting it all out and waiting. I thank you for your volunteering. I'm thanking you in advance because I know the hard work you're going to be doing. So we'll move on.
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions.
Of course.
On this committee, you've placed, your intention is to place 2 council members on the committee, so that does limit who can attend the meetings. I.e., there's 3 people now in the city that cannot attend the meetings.
Right.
Unless they're an open meeting.
Correct.
So from a personal perspective and a strong interest, and I think it'd be from transparency standpoint, is it possible to mandate that all meetings have minutes taken of the meeting that are available?
No doubt. I think that when you all get into your meetings and you do the chairman, you should also have a secretary. And Kim, I think that when it's apparent that obviously we're going to have to post these meetings, okay? Because if any other one of the council members come forward, it's going to have to be posted. So just keep that in mind when we're moving forward and we get that first date done. Thank you, John. That's a great observation. Okay, let's move on to item number. What did you say, John? Let's see. Yeah. Since this is a mayor's appointed committee, there's no need to take action on a vote. Is that correct?
What was that, Mayor?
There's no need to take a vote or an action?
No, sir,
because
this
there
was
is,
a mayor appointment committee.
Right, okay. So let's go to item number 13. And that's the one you want to move forward, right, John? Okay. Item number 13 is discuss and take possible action on authorizing the city manager to negotiate the scope and fee proposal with the city engineer, RPS Klotz Associates, to develop preliminary plans for drainage improvements on Banyan Drive and North Manton Lane. Mr. Shands?
Mr. Luis Cuellar is here from Klotz, and he will make a short presentation to the council and answer questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for waiting.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yes, we met about a week ago today, I think it was September 6th, that we met with the Drainage Committee, and we discussed drainage budget that the city has in the neighborhood of about $350,000 that we're trying to see where we can utilize best based on the Phase 1 and Phase 2 drainage reports that we've already prepared for the city. And I think the consensus was that the two most problematic areas that we identified in our drainage studies were in the North Manton, South Manton Lane area, as well as Carrollwood and Banyan. So what we, and let me give a little background, actually. Let me back up. On those two particular areas, we're currently doing a separate study with the city of San Antonio, with another firm, and looking at a regional improvement plan to see what can be done to alleviate some of that upstream watershed that is coming from the city of San Antonio in these two specific areas. The one that I'm more engaged with right now is the one on North Manton, and I'm not really sure, and I've actually reached out to some folks to see what is going on Carrollwood and Banyan, but I haven't heard what is being done. But I know that there are some studies and plans by the city of San Antonio to also look at that as more of a regional improvement. So back to this item, what we want to do is see what we can do to improve on some of these more frequent low-intensity type rain events that are kind of nuisance, and even with these low intensities, you still have flooding issues and potential safety issues. So we're going to look at what we can do in these two specific areas, and see how best to utilize that $350,000 budget that we have. So this first initial phase would be what I spoke with Mr. Shands is we'd get a little bit of topographic survey within the areas where we think we can make some improvements, and then we'll develop some sort of preliminary plan that we would sit down with Mr. Shands and the Drainage Committee potentially, and seeing, hey, this is what we can do, and this is what the cost is, and then at that point we'll see how to move forward, given that maximum total budget of $350,000.
Thank you. Okay. This is an action item, so let's put a motion on the table in a second, please.
I so move the motion.
Second? Okay, we got a first and a second. Douglas, you want to start off? Any questions for Mr. Klotz, please?
I have no questions.
Huh?
I have no questions.
No questions?
No questions, I'm on the Drainage Committee.
All right, great. All right, nobody wants to say anything? Let's move forward. All right. All in favor?
Mayor, I have some questions, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. No, I really am. I was acting like nobody wanted to ask any questions up
Waiting
here.
for the opportunity.
Oh, well, you know what?
Even have my mic pressed, ready to go here,
Opportunity is given, sir.
So, now, Luis, thank you for attending tonight. Thank you for sharing. My ongoing concern is, yeah, we definitely have drainage problems within our city. Question is that $350,000 that we're looking at trying to spend in those two areas, can that adequately mitigate the amount of stormwater runoff that comes into our city from the city of San Antonio? And I believe you would confirm that the majority of that stormwater runoff, probably a relatively high percentage, is city of San Antonio, is water from the city of San Antonio versus water that's stormwater runoff that's generated within the city of Castle Hills. I think that's a fair assertion. Would you concur with that or not?
Yes, for the most part, the section on North Manton, obviously, because it's just immediately south of that watershed, or that specific area that we're gonna be looking at. Really, it's true for both. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think before we spend a lot of engineering dollars in trying to come up with our own internal solution, I personally would like to see what San Antonio is doing to help so we can work in concert with them and maybe spend the dollars with them. And if this provides that capability, then I would be for it, but I don't see any mention of that in here. I super appreciate you bringing forward the fact that San Antonio is taking a serious interest in this. But again, I think I'd like to hear what kind of interest, or what exactly, where we're at on the design process or in the investigation process with the city of San Antonio. I mean, we need to build up a partnership with them to help move forward on this. And, you know, Carrollwood being a huge issue, and also, I mean, and coming across West Africa being huge, they're both huge issues. And they both present some unique issues, some unique problems of how to mitigate that stormwater runoff. You know, how do we move forward in concert with the city of San Antonio to help resolve this and make it, because it's more of a regional issue when you look at it in those in that tense anyways, or in that sense. Can you care to comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the improvements that we would, or that I would recommend, would for both of these areas would be where they are coordinated with what's being done in the current study with the city of San Antonio. So specifically, and I'll start with with North Manton. I think what we're going to look at here, Councilman, is just very, very specific to some of the stuff. Let me back up. What we're studying for right now with the city of San Antonio on North Manton is an underground storm sewer, and this is all very preliminary, but it's going to start on West Avenue and Lock Hill Selma, and then traverse on Lock Hill Selma through North Manton. And anyway, it's going to go all the way to West Avenue potentially, and outfall into Aggie Park. So that's a huge project that really what we're going to be looking at here is more of a localized, what can we do here on the short term that is still feasible and makes sense, and it's not going to be a waste. And really, the same thing with Carrollwood and Banyan. I mean, the stuff that I've seen, there may be some solutions that are not a lot of money, and they're not going to, go to waste, quote unquote.
Okay.
So we're going to be very cognizant of that, I think, and I'm sure I'm going to get question from the Drainage Committee when we do move, present what we think, how we need to move forward, that it isn't going to be a waste of City Castle Hills money.
Okay, and that'll be integrated into your approach as you move forward on this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, John. You're okay? Did you want to, okay, we have a person signed up to speak on this item. Doug Ingsland. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for waiting through all this.
I'm Doug Elzingo, 103 Tamworth Drive. I just want to thank the City Council for looking at this issue, and I've just brought some pictures and a kind of a drawing of where kind of the trouble spots are for the Carrollwood Banyan issue. It is a public safety issue. In 2013, we nearly had someone drown at that ditch when their car got stalled in there and flooded out. Continue to see people today who, when that floods out with an inch of rain, that they drive up and down there. I've seen kids on bicycles. So I think part of the issue that we have with that ditch on Banyan is that it creates sort of a whirlpool effect, and the water is not flowing directly down into the ditch. And so I'm hopeful that part of the study will be how can we figure to make that water flow more quickly and more directly and out of the roads. So thank you for looking at it, and I'll give these to City.
Thank you, Doug. Okay. So this is a possible action item, and I would suggest that, do we have a motion? I know, just for discussion and take possible action, so the possible action would be to develop and the scope as direct the city manager to do so. That's correct? All in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, the last item on the agenda is, thank you, Mr. Klotz, for being here. Thank you for spending the time. Appreciate it. Okay, the last item on the agenda is consider ordinance number 2016-0913B, an ordinance amending the building permit schedule of fees approved by ordinance number 2015-0414C and establishing a standardized fee for single and two-family re-roofing city permits. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Douglas, your thoughts?
I've discussed this with several people, including Mr. Sands and yourself. We've come to the conclusion that what we're presently charging is onerous and that a flat $50 fee is more reasonable.
Okay. Mr. Paul, did you have any comments or suggestions for the motion?
I agree that our current fee structure on roofing is too high. I just had mine done, and it was almost $300. Of course, the insurance company took care of it, fortunately. I believe it is a little high, and as I mentioned in a budget meeting, Janet was talking about trying to look at all these schedules and try to bring some of them into line. I would be for increasing it, but we pay $50 for an inspector, and it leaves nothing for administration fee. It leaves nothing for anything out of the office. And I would go along with something, but I would want the fee to be $125, a flat fee.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Squire, did you have any comments to move forward?
Well, in our last budget meeting, and I believe everybody's aware, I spoke out fairly hard about our roofing and the ridiculous fees that we were charging. I think I'm the one that brought that to the table. And so I appreciate Mr. Gregory for following up on that and also moving forward with this. I've had a chance to look into it a little bit. I asked Mr. Shands to come up with some cost, because I think a $50 fee doesn't cover our cost. I think I think Mr. Paul has a very reasonable idea that will cover our costs, going forward on something like this, a flat nominal fee. But I'd like information from the city manager as far as what he believes, what he believes the cost structure on that should be, so we, cover ourselves, but also don't, in my opinion, gouge the public.
When you ask that, Councilmember Squire, you're right. We have, coming up in 2017, we're going to be paying $50. Right now, we are still only paying $35 for the permit inspection. So the $50 now is probably close to a break even. It will not be in 2017. We will add the $50 fee and then add, counting an average time period of the individual at the counter, average time period to, crank out the permit and hand it to them, add $25. Probably a good sign. Some of those will go faster. They wouldn't have called in and expedited it. Some of them will go slower, but somewhere in the vicinity of $75 to $80 would probably be our actual cost whenever the inspection fee goes to $50.
Mr. Shands, does that include, this is going to go into our code system? And does that include if we have re-inspections, or would that be an additional fee?
No, sir. Failed inspection triggers an additional permit inspection fee, so you'd pay another $50 if you failed the first inspection.
Or another $80?
No, whatever we establish, I'm sorry, yes, whatever we establish, we could. Or we could, if depending on how the council feels, if you feel like that second fee, the first fee we probably need to make some reasonable amount of money on, because breaking even probably isn't the idea.
Okay.
But the second fee, we could if council desire, we could just hold it at $50, which would be a re-inspection fee only. Not a, no new permit issue, nothing else done, just going to go over there and do it, in which case we sort of eat that one if we had the internal processing. Or it could be a double fee in that case, if you want to do something like that. But it's typically that you would, typically what we do now is charge a $50 re-inspection fee with our inspections only running $35. So
Do you have any information on what other cities do if they have to do a reinspection, how that fee structure works?
on roofs, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Right. They're minimal, let me put it that. I don't have a specific number, but of the couple of hundred permits we've issued already, I would bet there's not more than 10% that get re-inspected.
So again, if we were to tier this, what would be the first fee, and then what would be the reinspection fee? That would be appropriate to cover, any, we want to make sure and, cover our costs and cover the time and labor of doing this, but not more than what we need.
We probably should just stick with, for now, if the 125 is the final number, or whatever number it is, we probably should stick with 50 because that's what we're doing right now. And then whenever 2017 comes, we may want to actually revisit that. Like I say, we're charging $50 now, and that takes into account the processing that goes through to have someone come in, get a reinspection fee, pay it, and leave. Because we're only right now we're only paying $35 for an inspection. In 2017, we're going to start paying 50.
But again, that's strictly the cost for the inspector.
The $35 is, or the 50 in 2017. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so right now, we've got about $15 cranked into the issuing of it.
Okay.
Whenever the person comes in and says, I failed, here's my slip. Now we've got to say, okay, we've got to take down the address, take down the deal, reassign the case to go back out. So it takes not long.
Okay.
5,
Because
10
understand
minutes.
the admin, you figure the admin time is about $30, $25 to $30.
For the permit, when they're having to fill out everything, start all over, start from scratch. Give us the address, give us the plans, give us the whatever they're going to have,
Okay.
the roofing information, the material information. When you come back to get the reinspection, all you do is come in and said, I failed, here's my failure, and we just immediately reschedule an inspection.
So would it be reasonable to say we charge, as an example, $100 permit fee with a $50 reinspection fee?
For now, yes. That will be in.
That will cover us going forward?
That will cover us at approximately a $20 transfer to the general fund, yes, at that point, which came off the first $100. Because when you say going forward, I'm thinking you mean in 2017.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
to not
In
revisit
2017,
this.
the $50 is a money loser just because there's processing at the counter. So you would lose some money on that, but you would make it at the front on the $100
I don't want to make it
issuance.
in the front though either though. I mean, I want reasonable, so it'd be an $80 fee up front, an $80 reinspection fee then.
I would rather see quite honestly, for income, I would rather see a heavier fee up front because there's so few reinspection fees.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? That would be more advantageous, and more work is done up front. I'd rather you front load it rather than overcompensate at the end.
So it
If you
makes
did-
sense so you'd prefer a $100 inspection fee, or correction, a $100 permit fee, and then a $50 reinspection fee. Is that what I understand?
That would be another example, yes. Anything you do up front should be more. The 50 is a wash, basically.
Okay,
So,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Comments?
Yes, sir. Mr. Shannon, so regardless of the scope of work and the size of the project, the inspector makes one visit?
the final, yes, sir, there's only, typically, there's a final inspection and that's it, and so the interesting thing here is what we're trying to do is we're doing a one-size-fits-all. If you come in and re-roof a 1,200 square foot house, you're going to pay the same amount as someone who re-roofed a two-story, 7,000 square feet of shingles house.
And I
And
think
so
at
that one takes more time, because that one is gonna, you gotta look through the binoculars a little longer.
right, at that point, I think as long as we're receiving the same charge, then it's fair that we pass along the same charge. Thank you, Mr. Shands.
Thank you. Okay,
Mayor, I'd like to amend this resolution.
sure.
I'd like to amend this, that we approve the resolution as written, except for the permit fee is a $100 initial permit fee with a $50 reinspection fee.
Okay, we have an amendment to the original motion? Your motion? Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote on the amendment. All in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. Now let's go back to the original. And we had a motion and we had a second. All in favor of the original? The amendment already passed. Yeah, okay, it's approved. Thank you. All right, now we're down to council's comments. JR, do you have any comments?
Just want to remind everybody that National Night Out is coming up. I'm not sure, Chief, do you know how many homes we have signed up this year?
I want to say 11, 10 or 11 last count.
I'm hoping we could break some records, but either way,
Kevin said we needed 3 to break the record last year.
we'll go for quality over quantity. I just
There you
wanted to
go.
remind people
We
to
had
go out,
13.
meet your neighbors, have a good time.
Thank you, JR. Mr. Gregory, did you have any comments? Anything? Mr. Paul? Mr. Squire? Okay, I just wanted to point something out here real quick. We do have up and running our new phone system. And as of tomorrow, it will be, the new guide will be on our webpage. It's already there. Oh, well, great. It's already there. There are copies of it in the back. What we're doing is we are not going to give up the personalized service of a human if you call the 342-2341, but now you no longer have to go through the operator. You can call direct to the department. We would ask that if that person and it goes to phone mail, that you don't go back and call through the 342-2341 and ask for that department, because it's going to go to the same place. So with that said, we've also got our Facebook page up and running. We've talked to Clear Channel, and within a number of days, we're going to be advertising to the whole city of San Antonio our new approach to communication, which is Facebook. We have Instagram. We've, at this time, passed on Twitter, but of course there is, if you would still like to go into it, Nextdoor. But we'll be concentrating on the Facebook and our city website. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for toughing it out. It is 9 o'clock, one of our longer meetings, but we did have, 13 items, 18, whatever it is, who's counting? So do I have a motion? Do I have a second? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
This looks like a great table.
This is the age ordinance that we just did. It was passed.
Uh-huh. God, I spent so much time on this. I'm still not sure we got it right.
And then,
Carmen,
yes. And that's copied off your last one that you did.
okay. supposed to make a change in that late fee, but we'll have to do that later.
Is it S? Holy
Uh-huh.
crap.
Take care, brother.
Thought I was doing good.
Oh, well.
Perfect. Did a great job.
No problem, no problem. It's Shane.
Oh, okay. Michael Shane.
Yep.
Okay, and then this is the re-roofing permit, but this, I'm trying to think, see, it's changed, so maybe we
Do
really have to
you know
hold
what
off
it
on
changed to?
this. Yeah, it's 100 here, this is 100.
Yeah.
And then the,
They're gonna add in another,
$50 reinspection fee.
you're probably gonna have to redo
Yeah,
that
I'm gonna
thing.
have to redo this one.
Too bad.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
I'll
I
come
just
around
don't
if you
know-
need me to.
Yeah, I just don't know when you come, so I'm like, oh, I better get you now.
Well,